My name is Nicole. I was 27 when my parents left me completely out of their will. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat in that stale, oak paneled lawyer's office and waited for someone to say they were joking. They weren't. My dad cleared his throat like he had a frog lodged in it and said, "It's not personal, sweetheart." But it was. It always had been. The truth is, I wasn't even supposed to be there. The will reading was scheduled for after my grandfather's funeral, in the private office of his attorney, a man I'd only ever heard spoken about in whispers. There were 5 people in that room: my mom, my dad, my older brother Caleb, our family's accountant, Mr. Harmon, and me, still wearing the heels I'd nearly twisted my ankle in trying to make it to Grandpa Henry's gravesite before the service ended. I hadn't made it, Mr. Harmon adjusted his glasses, laid out the official documents, and began reading. My father and brother received controlling interest in the family business, a timber logistics empire that I had helped manage for 5 years. My mom received properties in Sarasota and a trust. Caleb got the lakeside house. When it was my turn, Mr. Harmon paused. Nicole was not included in this version of the will. My mother didn't even flinch. She looked at her cuticles. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Mr. Harmon just nodded slowly, his voice flat. "There was an amendment made 6 weeks ago. Your grandfather was very clear in his instructions." I knew immediately something was wrong. Grandpa Henry had given me power of attorney 3 years ago when he had a minor stroke. We met weekly. He reviewed every legal document with me personally, painstakingly. I had signed nothing, seen nothing about this amendment, and more importantly, Grandpa would never have disinherited me. Not unless someone convinced him I had betrayed him, or maybe if someone changed something. After the reading, I pulled my father aside in the parking lot of the law office. We were standing between 2 Range Rovers under the sweltering Texas sun. "Tell me the truth," I said. "Did you make Grandpa change his will?" He just stared past me at the highway and muttered, "It's done, Nicole. Let it go." But I couldn't. Because a week before Grandpa died, he handed me something in the parking lot of Red Oak Diner, right after we had breakfast. It was a sealed envelope. "Don't open this unless they try something," he said, eyes sharper than they'd been in months. I hadn't opened it, not until that night, sitting alone in my car outside the same diner, and inside the envelope was the real will. The paper trembled in my hands, but my grip was steady. I unfolded it like a sacred relic. The diner's parking lot lights flickered above, catching the bold, looping signature at the bottom of the page. My grandfather's name. It was unmistakable. This version of the will didn't just include me, it placed me at the center. The language was clear. Grandpa left me 51% of the company, not Caleb, me, the bookstore property in Waco, the Houston warehouse, even the lakefront cabin he'd always called our spot when I was little, all in my name. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I screamed, not out of shock, not from grief, from rage. How dare they? How dare they erase me from my own legacy? I drove straight to the only person I could trust with something this big. Claire Davis, my best friend since high school and now a paralegal at a boutique litigation firm in downtown Austin. We met behind the parking garage of her office, her still in a pencil skirt and heels, me shaking like I'd just walked out of a fire. "You need to see this," I said, thrusting the papers into her hands. She didn't speak for 2 whole minutes, just read. Her eyes darted, scanned, froze. "Nicole," she said finally, her voice quiet but clipped, "this is a legally formatted will. It's not notarized, but it's signed, witnessed, and dated 2 weeks after the version they read in court." I stared at her, breath trapped in my chest. "That means," I began. "It means," she cut in, "someone presented an outdated document in court. And if that was intentional," her voice dropped to a whisper, "that's fraud." The word hit me like a slap. I leaned back against the brick wall of the garage and exhaled. I remembered Grandpa's last few weeks, how Caleb barely visited, how Dad kept canceling because of supplier meetings. I was the one who stayed with him during his physical therapy sessions. I was the one who kept the books running. I was the one he trusted. Claire folded the paper carefully, like it was made of silk. "We need a probate attorney, someone who's handled contested wills. I can make a few calls." I nodded. "But I'm not just challenging this in court," I said. "I want them to know what they did. I want them to feel it." Claire's expression changed. Her features, usually soft and comforting, sharpened. "Then you better be ready to fight like hell, because this won't just be legal. This is going to be personal." The next morning, I booked a consultation with a lawyer named Marcus Fields. Claire swore by him, said he made opposing counsel sweat before they even stepped into the courtroom. His office was in a sleek tower downtown, all glass and leather and silence thick with consequence. He read the will without a word. When he looked up, his eyes were cold steel. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "then your family knowingly submitted a false document in probate court. That's criminal." "But we're not pressing charges," I said quickly. "Not yet," he raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want?" I didn't hesitate. "I want everything my grandfather left me, and I want them in the room when I take it back." The air went still. Mr. Fields leaned back in his chair and nodded once. "Then let's make them show their hand." The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and dread. Marble floors echoed every footstep. A bailiff directed me down a narrow hallway with peeling paint and a brass plaque reading Probate Division 3C. I clutched the slim leather folio Marcus had handed me. Inside, the original will, Grandpa's letter, and Claire's affidavit. I wasn't just walking into a hearing, I was walking into a war zone, and across the polished hallway outside the courtroom stood my parents, smiling. "Nicole," my mother said coolly. She was dressed like she was headed to a garden brunch. Pale green blazer, gold scarf, a brooch she used to wear only on Easter. "I didn't know you'd be joining us today." Dad gave a small, mock surprised chuckle. "We thought you'd moved on. This can't be healthy, sweetheart." Healthy. That word snapped something loose in me. These people had rewritten my family history with the stroke of a pen, and they were worried about my wellness. My lawyer, Marcus Fields, stepped beside me like a shadow growing taller. "We'll see you inside," he said, his voice dry as desert wind. They didn't answer, just turned and walked into the courtroom like it was a country club meeting. The room wasn't large, a judge's bench, 2 counsel tables, a dozen empty pews, but it felt enormous, like every corner held an echo of what they'd done. We took our seats at the petitioner's table. Marcus flipped open his file, calm, surgical. I kept my eyes fixed on the judge's entrance door, like the wood itself might start burning under my stare. When the bailiff called the session to order and the judge entered, everything slowed down. "Docket number 238C, the clerk read. "Walters Estate, motion to amend probate distribution submitted by Nicole Marie Walters." My full name rang through the room like a bell. The judge, a compact woman in her 60s with a tired but sharp gaze, looked over her glasses at me. "Miss Walters, are you prepared to present evidence?" Marcus stood. "Yes, Your Honor. The petitioner is prepared to demonstrate that the will submitted during original probate proceedings was outdated and potentially superseded by a more recent document." He handed over the folio. The judge accepted it without comment. I watched her thumb through the first pages. My grandfather's handwriting stared up at her in looping blue ink. That's when I heard it. A scoff. Quiet but deliberate. I turned. Caleb had entered the courtroom late, slipping in through the rear doors like a smug ghost. He sat beside our parents, phone still glowing in his lap. I hadn't seen him in weeks, maybe months, but the expression on his face was familiar. Disdain dressed up in expensive cologne and half-closed eyelids. He didn't believe I had it in me. Good, because that would make what came next easier. "Mr. Fields," the judge said after a moment, "I'll need time to verify the authenticity and witness signatures. If this document holds, we'll move forward with reprobate procedures." Marcus nodded. "Understood, Your Honor. We're prepared for that review." My mother raised a hand like she was hailing a cab. "Excuse me, Your Honor. Shouldn't this be dismissed immediately? That document hasn't been validated, and this is disruptive. Frankly, we're concerned about Nicole's mental state." The courtroom chilled. The judge didn't flinch. "That's not your determination to make, Mrs. Walters." My father leaned forward, elbows on the table. "It's just, this whole process feels emotional." That word again. I didn't realize I'd stood up until I heard the wooden bench groan under me. "Your Honor," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "I may be emotional, I may be grieving, but I'm not delusional. My grandfather gave me that document because he knew something might happen, and I intend to prove him right." The judge met my gaze for one long beat. Then she simply nodded. "Motion under review. Adjourned for verification. Next hearing in 2 weeks." The gavel dropped. It was only the first step. But for the first time since that brutal brunch, I felt it. Leverage. The lock still remembered me. I stood in the back room of the old bookstore, the scent of dust, pine cleaner, and aged paper washing over me like a lost language. The office had been untouched for nearly 10 months since Grandpa Henry died, and the building had been temporarily closed for renovations according to the chipped sign duct taped to the glass, but I still had my key. The padlock on the rear service door creaked, the bolt stiff but compliant. I slipped inside quietly, like I was breaking into memory itself. This was where it had all started. My Saturdays helping Grandpa file receipts, the late afternoons learning inventory software when I was 16. The shelves were still overstuffed. The overhead light buzzed in that faint flickering pattern that drove Grandpa nuts. I knew every crack in the tile, every creak in the floorboards, every drawer in his old walnut desk, except one. The bottom left drawer, reinforced with steel on the inside, had always been locked. Grandpa used to tap it with the back of his ring finger and say, "Someday, Nikki, you'll know what's in here when you need it." And then he'd laugh, like it was a joke. It wasn't. I dropped to my knees and reached into my coat pocket. The small brass key was still taped to the back of the envelope he'd given me, the one with the real will. I hadn't noticed it until that morning, rereading the folds in the paper, searching for anything I'd missed. It fit perfectly. The drawer clicked open with the reluctant sigh of something that hadn't been touched in years. Inside was a black ledger book wrapped in plastic, a sealed business envelope, and a thick manila folder labeled in Grandpa's looping script. For NMW, personal and legal. I pulled everything out and spread it across the desk, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. The envelope contained a notarized affidavit, Grandpa's signature, dated 8 days before the will that had been read in court. It declared his clear and voluntary intent to update beneficiaries in light of recent conduct by family members. No names mentioned, but no doubt what he meant, the ledger book. That's when my hands started shaking. It contained notes, names, payments, copies of transfer logs, checks, and something more chilling, references to preparatory withdrawals from trust accounts, accounts I hadn't even known existed. He was documenting something, preparing for something. It wasn't just about the business or the bookstore. It was about the people who'd taken control after he got sick. And suddenly, I knew I couldn't just win this case in court. I needed to understand why they did it and how far they'd gone. Because this was no misunderstanding. This was a plan. The last item in the drawer was small but unmistakable. A flash drive taped to the bottom in clear Scotch tape. Grandpa didn't use technology lightly. If he put something on there, it mattered. I didn't have my laptop, but I didn't need it. I knew someone who'd help. Claire answered on the second ring. "Where are you?" she asked immediately, her voice alert. "The bookstore. I found something," I said. "Something big." She didn't hesitate. "On my way." I locked the office behind me and sat on the curb outside, folder clutched to my chest. The sky above was gray and close. My family thought they'd buried everything with Grandpa's ashes, but they forgot what he taught me. The truth leaves a paper trail. And I was about to follow it. Claire's studio smelled like printer toner and lemon disinfectant. She locked the door behind us and pulled the blinds, then placed the flash drive into her laptop like it was a detonator. I stood behind her chair, gripping the manila folder from the drawer like a life vest. "Ready?" she asked. "No," I whispered. "But do it anyway." The drive blinked once, twice, then opened. 6 folders, each with a date, each labeled in Grandpa's usual obsessive shorthand. Claire opened the most recent first. Inside, audio files. She clicked the top one. My grandfather's voice filled the room. Weak, rasping, but unmistakable. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And if she's hearing it, it means they did exactly what I feared." My stomach clenched. I couldn't breathe. Claire looked up at me slowly. "Nicole, he made recordings." I nodded once. "Play the next one." For the next 20 minutes, we listened. Not to confessions, to evidence. Grandpa had started documenting everything from his hospital bed. Dates when financial documents were taken from his nightstand, conversations overheard, mentions of meetings between Caleb and an unnamed attorney. He wasn't rambling, he was building something, a timeline, a record. One clip froze the air solid. "I know they want the business, I know they think Nicole won't fight, but I'm betting they're wrong." I sat down slowly on the floor beside Claire's desk. He knew. He saw it coming. He left me a trail. Claire opened the next folder. Inside were scanned PDFs, bank statements, emails he must have printed, then scanned using the old copier in the bookstore's back room. Highlighted withdrawals. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. One line item stood out. A consulting fee. $25,000. paid from the business account to a name I didn't know. Who's Michael Renshaw? I asked. Claire typed quickly, lips pressed thin. Private consultant, she said. Former probate auditor, suspended 3 years ago for ethical violations. I blinked. Nicole, she said slowly, this guy was disbarred for altering beneficiary documents on behalf of family members. One of his clients went to jail. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of her desk. Are you saying? I'm saying your family hired a man with a history of falsifying documents weeks before your grandfather died, and then presented an outdated will in court. Silence. Then, rage. Hot, clean, sobering rage. I stood up and paced the room. My whole life, my parents told me to stop imagining things. That I was dramatic, that I was reading too much into looks, silences, tones. But Grandpa hadn't thought so. He thought it was real enough to record, real enough to track, real enough to hide the truth in a drawer only I could open. I turned to Claire. Can we subpoena his financials? If your lawyer moves fast, she said. Yes, especially if Marcus can prove the pattern of misconduct. But you'll need more than this. I'll get it. How? I'm going to talk to someone who never learned how to keep secrets. Claire raised a brow. Who? I didn't answer. I just grabbed my coat and folder, because there was one person who'd been in every room, every Sunday dinner, every bookkeeping meeting, every late-night signature session when Grandpa got too tired to finish his own math. And that person wasn't my parents. It was Caleb's fiancée. Her name was Megan, and Megan hated secrets. The only thing louder than the clinking champagne glasses at the Riverwalk Garden Club was the silence between us. Megan was seated near the center table, tucked between two realtors and a nonprofit board member, wearing the kind of pastel dress that makes everyone assume you're harmless. I stood across the patio, hidden behind a row of ficus trees, and borrowed courage. This wasn't just a brunch. It was a political mixer disguised as a fundraiser for a local library. Caleb's company had sponsored the event, which meant his fiancée, ever the dutiful trophy-to-be, had shown up early, smiled through introductions, and was now on her second mimosa. She didn't see me coming until I was inches away. Nicole? Her eyes widened, then narrowed. What are you doing here? Nice to see you too, Megan, I said. I need a word. In front of the executive director of the Literacy Fund? No, in the hallway. 2 minutes. She glanced around, clearly calculating the social fallout. Then she stood. The hallway behind the patio was narrow and dimly lit, lined with framed photos of donors and sepia-toned images of children reading. Megan folded her arms, her charm vanishing like mist. You have no idea what you're getting into, she said. I held out the flash drive. He recorded everything. Henry knew. He documented the accounts, the edits, the signatures. I just need one confirmation. Megan blinked. For a moment, I thought she might laugh, but then her face changed, like a mask dropping. I told Caleb not to involve him, she said quietly, but your dad insisted. He said it had to be airtight, said you'd find a way to make noise. My heart stopped. You knew. I was there the night they had the meeting. The consultant came to the house, said the updated version could be misplaced and a prior one would hold if no one contested it. She exhaled. I was in the kitchen. They didn't know I was listening. I stared at her, then testify. Are you out of your mind? I have records. I have the will. I just need a witness. You're the only one outside that circle who saw it. You think Caleb would forgive me? No, I said, but you're not the one who needs forgiving. For a long time, she didn't answer. Then her voice softened. He didn't want to do it, you know, your grandfather. When they brought him the paperwork to sign the older will, I saw the look on his face. He was confused, tired, but scared too. Like he knew they'd already decided. I felt my stomach twist. He signed? Once, then he tore it up. Said, I've made my real choice already, you'll see. Then why didn't you say something sooner? Because I thought they'd leave it alone, that you'd just walk away like always. I didn't think you'd come back swinging. I stepped closer. You're the only one who can help me finish what he started. Megan looked away, fingers trembling slightly against her purse. If I do this, I lose everything. No, I said. If you don't, you lose yourself. The hallway went silent again. Finally, she nodded. I'll meet with your lawyer. That was all I needed. I turned to leave, but Megan's voice stopped me. They're hiding something else, she said lower now. There's another document, something Henry wrote weeks before he died. I heard your mom mention it once, said if it ever got out, they'd all be done. My blood froze. Where? She didn't say, but she was scared. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because I had just realized this wasn't just a legal betrayal, this was a cover up, and I had only scratched the surface. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table in Claire's apartment, surrounded by papers, timelines, phone recordings, Megan's affidavit in progress, and one question that kept pulsing like a warning siren. What were they still hiding? Megan's words looped in my head. They're hiding something else. A document Henry wrote weeks before he died. If it ever got out, they'd be done. Claire ran a search through probate filings, storage records, even hospital archives. Nothing. But I knew one place that had been scrubbed clean too early, one place my mother locked up within 72 hours of the funeral. The guest house. Not the main property, not Grandpa's office or the family library. No, she'd hired a locksmith to change the code on the side unit behind the garden wall. She told everyone it was being cleared for sale, but no one had ever bought it. And the light still came on sometimes when no one was supposed to be there. By dawn, I was in my car. The air over the highway felt thick, electric. Every passing mile rewound time. Trees blurred, fields passed, and then there it was. The red iron gate, the manicured hedges, and the guest house in the back. Small, square, white trimmed, completely out of place on a property like this. I parked 2 streets away and walked the rest. Hoodie up, gloves on, just like Grandpa taught me when I was 13 and lost the spare key to the bookstore. You don't wait for doors to open, he used to say. You find another way in. I scaled the side fence behind the compost bins. The yard hadn't been trimmed in months, but the blinds were pulled tight and a faint buzzing came from inside. An old dehumidifier, or maybe a server rack. The side door had a coded keypad. I stared at it. Then I tried something stupid. My mom's birthday, click, unlocked. Inside, the air was cold and dry. The lights didn't flicker. The whole guest house felt curated, sanitized, like a museum. Bare shelves, folded towels, no clutter. But the desk in the back bedroom, his desk, was still there, and the bottom drawer was slightly open. I didn't breathe. I just pulled. Inside, a yellow file folder, unlabeled, thin. I opened it, 4 typed pages, all signed, all dated, a handwritten addendum at the back. I froze. It wasn't a will, it was a statement, a personal record. Henry Walters had written a notarized declaration addressed to his attorney and to whomever may seek to understand the disposition of my legacy. In it, he laid out his concerns, not just about his health, but about coercion. The word was typed in all caps. Coercion. He described undue pressure to sign early versions of documents. He mentioned feeling confused during specific dates. He listed the names of people present. And then came the addendum, dated 2 weeks before his death. I fear this statement will be destroyed or hidden by those who benefit from its absence. If my granddaughter finds this, she knows what to do. His signature looped once, clean and slow. I couldn't move. This wasn't just confirmation, it was ammunition. They didn't just lie, they manipulated a dying man and buried the evidence. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. Outside. Someone was on the porch. I snapped the folder shut, grabbed the file, and slid out the back window just as the front door creaked open. My shoes hit the dirt and I ran. No looking back, only forward. Because now I had it. The one thing they never expected anyone to find. The truth. The courtroom was colder than before. Maybe it was the storm rolling in. Thunder cracked faintly in the distance, vibrating through the high courthouse windows. Or maybe it was the tension humming across the room like a wire pulled too tight. I sat beside Marcus at the front counsel table, the yellow folder clutched in his leather briefcase, sealed and initialed. Megan was 2 rows behind me, hair pinned back, sunglasses tucked into her collar like armor. She hadn't spoken since our meeting. She didn't need to. Her signature was on the affidavit now. My mother and father sat directly across the aisle. Caleb wasn't with them this time. Neither was their attorney from last session. Instead, they had someone new, sharper, older, the kind of man who didn't shake hands when he arrived. He simply opened his folder and began to dismantle. Let him try. The judge entered exactly on time. The bailiff called the session to order. No one moved except Marcus, who stood the second her gavel dropped. Your Honor, he began, steady as a surgeon, we are submitting 2 new pieces of material evidence. First, a notarized statement from the deceased, Mr. Henry Walters, expressing explicit concerns of coercion regarding the previously submitted will. Second, a signed affidavit from a direct witness, Ms. Megan Ferris, who was present during relevant conversations and confirms the presence of outside influence in the preparation of that document. He passed both forward. The new defense attorney didn't even glance at them. He simply leaned toward the mic and said, "Your Honor, these documents were found after the statutory deadline. We consider them inadmissible." The judge raised a single brow. "They were located in a secondary property recently accessed by the petitioner, correct?" "Yes," Marcus replied, "with proof of familial ownership and evidence of concealment." "Were the materials tampered with?" "No, ma'am. Chain of custody is intact, dated, signed, notarized." A pause. Then the judge flipped open the folder, and the room held its breath. The sound of paper shifting filled the air like thunder echo. My mother stared down at her lap. My father stared at me. I didn't look away. When the judge spoke again, her voice was iron. "I have reviewed the original probate file submitted by the Walters estate. I have now reviewed a more recent will, as well as this notarized statement. And I must ask, on the record, why was this statement never disclosed?" My father opened his mouth, closed it. Then, for the first time in my life, I watched him defer. He turned to their new attorney. But the man had no answer. "Ms. Walters," the judge said, looking directly at me, "your grandfather named you in every legally relevant document recovered. The court now recognizes the likelihood of a fraudulent submission having occurred during the initial probate process. We will initiate an expedited evidentiary hearing within 10 days. She didn't slam the gavel this time. She just nodded, and everything changed. We exited in silence. The hallway buzzed behind us, reporters, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years, people murmuring my name like I was something fragile they'd underestimated. But I didn't care, not anymore, because the judge had looked at me, not at my lawyer, not at the evidence, me, and she believed me. Outside, the sky had turned slate gray. The first drops of rain hit the pavement like small, impatient warnings. Megan stood by the stairs, holding her umbrella like a shield. "You okay?" she asked softly. "No," I said, "but I will be." She nodded once. "They're not going to back down, you know." "I don't need them to back down," I said, stepping into the rain. "I just need them exposed." And I meant it, because this wasn't just about the will anymore. It was about legacy, mine, and the one they tried to steal. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to get. Claire buzzed me at 6:42 a.m., voice tight, flat. "Nicole, did you send anything to the opposing counsel?" "What?" "Did you or Marcus share Megan's affidavit or the digital files from the flash drive?" "No, why?" "They have them." My spine locked. I was still in bed, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. The sky outside was bruised pink with dawn. I hadn't even brushed my teeth, but now I was wide awake. Claire continued. "Marcus just called me. Their side submitted a preemptive motion claiming all of our evidence is inadmissible on the grounds of compromised chain of custody." How would they know our exact argument?" "They have the transcripts, Nicole, everything, even the digital timestamps." My throat went dry. Only 3 people had access to those files. Me, Marcus, and Claire. I trusted them both, but someone had broken that trust. I showered in silence, got dressed like I was preparing for battle, then drove straight to Marcus's office. He was already pacing in the lobby when I arrived. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled to his elbows. "This isn't just a leak," he said before I even spoke. "It's sabotage." We went upstairs to the conference room and locked the door. He laid it out fast. The defense filed a motion for suppression using our own files against us. Megan's affidavit had been printed, rescanned, and attached to a declaration claiming it had been fraudulently solicited under emotional duress. The flash drive documentation had been cited out of context. "They're twisting it," Marcus said, "to make it look like you tampered with everything." "That affidavit was signed in good faith," I snapped. "Megan agreed to it. I know," he cut in, "but they're painting her as a pressured witness, someone you cornered. They even referenced your history of emotional instability." I went still. History? There was no history. Unless someone gave them more than just the documents. "Claire didn't leak," I said quickly. "She wouldn't." "She says she didn't, and I believe her, but someone else got to those files." "How?" "We think your office laptop was compromised, maybe during the file transfers, maybe even earlier. You ever share your device?" No, I said, then hesitated, except once, 2 weeks ago. I'd left it charging during a gallery staff meeting. Caleb had dropped by to pick up a sculpture his friend was loaning for a fundraiser. I thought nothing of it. But now, I remembered the way he looked at my desk, at my open screen, at the flash drive sitting beside my coffee mug. Marcus leaned forward. We're not dead, but we've lost surprise. They know what we have now, they'll move fast. I nodded, jaw tight. Then we move faster. I left the office and called Megan from the car. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Then a text pinged through. I need space. I'm sorry. Just that. 6 words, like a door slamming shut. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my fingers ached. They were closing ranks. Turning up the heat, making everyone doubt, making me doubt. But I didn't drive home. I drove to the one place left that hadn't betrayed me. The cemetery. Grandpa's headstone was simple. Quiet, no statues, no flourishes, just a name and 2 dates. I stood there until the wind picked up and the sun crested the trees behind me. I'm still in, I whispered, even if I have to stand alone. And I meant it, because alone, I was still dangerous. The courtroom didn't hum, it rang. Not with sound, but with pressure, with the weight of too many lies packed into too few pages. Everyone felt it. The gallery was fuller than before. I caught flashes of faces I hadn't seen in years. Extended relatives, former family friends, even a teacher I hadn't spoken to since high school. All of them watching the girl who got cut out of the will walk into court with a locked jaw and a folder full of hell. Marcus straightened his tie beside me. They'll try to rattle you. Let them try. I nodded. I'm ready. Judge Brenner called the court to order. Her voice was crisp. No indulgence, no delay. We begin the evidentiary hearing in the matter of the Walters estate. Petitioner, Nicole Marie Walters. Respondents, Thomas and Elaine Walters, representing the original will submission. Petitioner claims fraudulent omission and undue influence in violation of state probate statutes. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Fields, proceed. He rose. Your Honor, we will demonstrate, clearly and without doubt, that the document submitted to this court was not the final expression of Mr. Henry Walters' intentions, that my client, his granddaughter, was removed under suspicious conditions, and that the true will, along with a sworn affidavit and a personal statement by the deceased, confirm the deliberate concealment of rightful inheritance. Then he looked toward the defense table. We also intend to show how this concealment was coordinated. Their lawyer stood. We moved to suppress any witness testimony gathered under duress or after litigation began. Judge Brenner didn't blink. Denied. Petitioner may call first witness. Marcus turned to me. Nicole, please take the stand. I didn't flinch. I walked up, raised my right hand, swore in under oath, and sat straight. What is your relationship to Henry Walters? He was my grandfather, legal guardian from age 16. I worked with him in the family business for 5 years prior to his death. Were you aware of your exclusion from the initial will submitted to this court? Yes, I was told during the reading. What was your reaction? I knew something was wrong. Why? Because my grandfather told me weeks before he died to expect interference. He gave me an envelope containing a later version of his will, and he asked me not to open it unless things went sideways. His words. Marcus approached the evidence cart, opened a folder, and held up a copy. This is that will? Yes. He submitted it into record. The judge accepted. Nicole, did you discover anything else? I nodded. After the will was challenged, I returned to my grandfather's bookstore office. Using a key hidden in the envelope, I accessed a locked drawer he had always told me to open only when I needed it. What did you find? A ledger of notes, a USB drive with voice recordings, and a notarized statement expressing fear of coercion. Was that the only copy? No, I later found the original version of that statement in the guest house behind my family's main property. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Someone behind me gasped. Do you believe your grandfather intended for you to find those documents? I know he did. He told me to trust what he taught me. Marcus turned. No further questions. Their attorney rose, and just like that, it began. He circled the podium like a hawk. Ms. Walters, are you in the habit of searching through private property? I searched property I had legal access to. Do you often interpret vague remarks as legal instructions? No, but this wasn't vague. Did your grandfather ever put in writing that you were his primary heir? Yes, it's in the will and in his statement. He smirked. But how do we know he wasn't confused? He was 89, on medication, declining. My eyes burned, but I didn't break. He wasn't confused. He was clear and scared, and you know why. That made him pause. I saw it, the hesitation, the smallest flicker of uncertainty, and that was enough. The first crack. The courtroom door creaked open just as Marcus stood to call our next witness. The judge glanced up, annoyed by the interruption, until she saw who it was. So did I, and my breath stopped. There, framed by the doorway, stood Amanda Bryant, holding a baby, my cousin. The one who vanished after Thanksgiving 3 years ago, the one who swore off the family, moved to Arizona, and blocked every phone number we had. The one my mother told everyone had gone unstable and couldn't be trusted. She was back, and she was walking straight toward the front. Marcus recovered first. Your Honor, we'd like to call Amanda Bryant to the stand, if it pleases the court. Does the witness have relevance? The judge asked. She's listed in the deceased's previous estate correspondence. We believe her testimony bears directly on the issue of undue influence. The judge nodded once. Proceed. Amanda passed the baby, maybe a year old, maybe younger, to a woman sitting in the gallery. Then she took the stand. I couldn't look away. The last time I'd seen her, she was screaming at my uncle in our backyard while Dad poured himself another bourbon and said, "Some people just like drama." She was different now, tired maybe, but grounded. She raised her right hand, swore in, then turned her gaze directly at my parents, and detonated. I was present in the main house on the day Thomas and Elaine Walters met with Michael Renshaw, she said, voice steady, the man who later submitted documentation to probate court. You were living on the property at the time? Marcus asked. I was visiting for the weekend. It was Caleb's birthday. I stayed in the spare room off the kitchen. The meeting happened at night. I heard it through the vent. What did you hear? Thomas said they were running out of time, that Henry was getting lucid again, that if they didn't lock things in soon, they'd be cut out. Gasps behind me, audible, raw. And what did Renshaw say? That he could reconstruct a version that would hold if the signatures matched and no one contested. But he warned that if anyone found a newer draft, it could collapse everything. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. A week later, Amanda continued, I confronted my aunt, told her what I heard. She told me to pack my things. Did you? I left that night. They cut off contact. When I called Grandpa to tell him, his number was disconnected. Marcus leaned in. Why didn't you come forward until now? Because I didn't think anyone would believe me, until Nicole started fighting back, until I saw her name in the news and realized she was doing what I couldn't. She looked at me then. I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner. I could barely nod. The defense attorney shot to his feet. Objection, this testimony is hearsay. The judge shut it down. She was a direct witness. Objection overruled. Amanda didn't flinch. She just kept staring at my parents. And my mother, for the first time, looked like she was unraveling. Her hands were clenched. Her lip was white from pressure. And Dad, he didn't even look up, just scribbled something in a legal pad like it mattered. It didn't, because the court had just heard it all. The planning, the consultant, the motive, from someone they never saw coming. And this time, they couldn't spin it. They couldn't bury it. They couldn't run. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled like old wood and fresh anxiety. Marcus leaned against the marble pillar, tapping a pen against his palm. His closing argument was solid, impeccable even, but his eyes kept drifting toward the door, toward the other side. They're going to pull something, he muttered. They have to. I didn't answer. I was staring out the window where a reporter stood across the street, talking to a camera I couldn't see. Her mouth moved fast, her hands sharper than her words. They want a headline, I said. Something they can spin before the ruling. Marcus turned toward me. You're not just a threat anymore, Nicole. You're a symbol. I didn't ask to be. No, but you earned it. I breathed out slowly. We had one more hour before reconvening. Claire was with Amanda downstairs, prepping a formal witness summary to attach to the court record. Megan was still ghosting. That stung, but I'd stopped counting who stayed loyal. I had evidence. I had sworn testimony. I had Grandpa's words in ink and breath. What I didn't have was immunity, because what I was about to do, submit the final digital voice file, could open doors none of us wanted open. I pulled the USB from my coat pocket and set it on the marble ledge. Are we sure about this? I asked quietly. Marcus looked at the drive like it was a grenade. It names names, he said. Not just your family, it could lead to a secondary investigation, maybe even charges. I stared at the tiny black casing, so small, but it weighed 100 years of legacy. If we don't use it, we win the inheritance case, he said. But the fraud, the coercion, the money trail, that all disappears into shadow. I nodded once and picked it up. We walked back inside. But just as the bailiff opened the door to call us forward, someone new appeared behind us. A woman in a deep blue suit carrying a folder, her badge clipped to her belt. Nicole Walters, she asked. Yes? I'm Agent Foster. We've received a referral from the Ethics Board at the Office of Probate Oversight. Someone from inside the Walters estate made a formal allegation of elder manipulation and will tampering. I'd like to speak with you privately. Marcus stepped between us. My client is in active civil proceedings. I'm not here to detain, she said smoothly. Just observe and let you know that once this hearing concludes, our office may open a formal investigation. My chest tightened. They knew. Somebody tipped them off, and it wasn't me. Can I ask, I said carefully, who submitted the allegation? She flipped the folder open. It was anonymous. Of course it was, but I saw the glint in her eye, a flash of sympathy or warning, and I realized something. They were scared of the ruling, scared enough to burn the whole building down before they let me win. Let her watch, I said to Marcus. Let everyone watch. We walked back in. The judge called the room to order for the final time. This court will now hear closing statements, she said. Marcus stood, and so did the defense. But before either could speak, the courtroom door opened one last time. And in walked Caleb, alone, hair slicked, suit crisp, face unreadable. He walked to the defense table, didn't sit, just whispered something to their attorney and slid a document across the table. The man paled, and suddenly, I knew. He was about to confess, or destroy us all. The document was just 4 pages long, typed, dated, signed, notarized, but when the judge finished reading it aloud, the silence was volcanic. Caleb stood still at the front of the courtroom, his hands behind his back like a man surrendering something no one had asked for. The judge looked up slowly. Her voice was tight. This court has just received a sworn declaration by Caleb Walters, co-beneficiary of the original estate filing, confirming that he became aware of inconsistencies in the will submitted after his grandfather's death. She glanced at the defense attorney, who looked like someone had carved the floor out from under him. According to this statement, she continued, the document in question was, quote, replicated from an earlier draft and presented under the assumption no updated version existed. Mr. Walters further states that he was told by Thomas Walters that the later will had been discarded by Henry during a moment of confusion, and that it was in the family's best interest to preserve the previous draft. The word preserve hung in the air like poison. I stared at Caleb. He didn't look at me. Didn't flinch, didn't smile, he just sat down beside my father. And that told me everything. He wasn't doing this for justice, he was doing it to protect himself, to jump ship before the fire reached his side of the deck. The judge turned to the gallery. This document corroborates significant elements of the petitioner's claim. Combined with the evidence previously submitted, it establishes a probable pattern of willful misrepresentation and material suppression. Then she looked directly at me. Ms. Walters, do you wish to proceed with your closing remarks? Marcus nodded once and stepped forward, but I didn't sit back. I stayed standing because I could feel the pull of something bigger, something that went beyond money, beyond courtrooms, beyond revenge. It was legacy, and I wasn't done yet. Your Honor, Marcus began, my client does not come to this court out of bitterness. She comes because her grandfather trusted her to tell the truth when others would not. She has done so, at great personal cost, with courage, with clarity, and with evidence. He held up the flash drive, including this final file, recorded 3 days before Mr. Walters passed. Objection, expected, overruled. The judge allowed it. The audio filled the room. Grandpa's voice, slower now, but sharp. I know what they've done. I've seen the whispers, the locked drawers, the changed dates. They think because I'm quiet, I don't see it. But I do. And if Nicole finds this, well, then she's everything I hoped she'd become. I closed my eyes, felt the weight lift, but then the defense's final move. My clients request that in light of Mr. Caleb Walters' cooperation, their attorney said, the court consider dismissal of further investigation into co-beneficiaries. The cooperation is voluntary. The remorse, genuine. I opened my eyes and saw it. They were sacrificing Caleb to shield my parents, trading one confession for a full escape. Judge Brenner raised her brow. Are you stating that the elder Mr. Walters' son and daughter had no knowledge of the false submission? They were misled, he said flatly. As was Caleb. I stood. Your Honor, the room froze. I can't accept that. The judge paused. You're not required to accept anything, but you will get your ruling. I'm not speaking as a petitioner, I said. I'm speaking as his granddaughter. My voice didn't shake. They all knew, all of them, and you don't need more evidence. You just need to look at who keeps trying to bury it. That silence, it felt like justice cracking its knuckles. The gavel didn't sound like a weapon. It sounded like release. The court finds in favor of the petitioner, Ms. Nicole Walters, Judge Brenner declared. The will submitted on May 12th is deemed invalid. The estate is to be distributed according to the later legally binding testament filed herein. A formal investigation into the actions of Thomas and Elaine Walters will be referred to the district attorney's office. She didn't look at my parents as she said it, but I did. Mom's hand shook so violently she dropped her pen. Dad just sat there, slack-jawed, as if his body understood the loss before his brain did. It didn't feel like a movie moment. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like rupture. Claire squeezed my shoulder behind me. Amanda wiped her eyes in the row behind. Marcus exhaled for what might have been the first time in days. But I didn't move, not even as people stood, not even as the judge left the bench, not even as my name rippled through the gallery like applause in reverse. Because I was remembering something Grandpa once said to me in the back room of the bookstore when I was 15 and furious at my father for lying about a scholarship. You can survive anything, he told me, except silence. Don't let them write you out of your own life. I hadn't, and I never would. I walked out into the hallway, past cameras and reporters, past old neighbors and distant relatives, until I was alone at the far end by the elevator. The doors opened. Caleb stood inside. He didn't speak. Neither did I. The doors closed between us with a cold hiss. Outside, the sky was burning gold. Marcus caught up to me on the front steps. You're the primary heir now, he said. All of it. The bookstore, the house, the shares, even the charity endowment Henry set up. It's all yours. I don't want it all, I said. He paused. Then what do you want? I looked down the street, toward the city, toward possibility. Just the parts of him they tried to erase. Amanda came up behind us. You have all of them now. I want the bookstore, I said. I want the first copy of every ledger he ever kept, and I want the key to the attic. Claire laughed softly. That's it? No, I said, turning to them. I want a press conference. Marcus blinked. Nicole, I want to say it myself, publicly, not just that they forged a will, but why and how. And what people like them do when they think no one's watching. He nodded slowly. You're not just taking the inheritance, Amanda whispered. You're taking the narrative. Later that week, I stood in front of the bookstore steps, now freshly painted, just like it was when Grandpa opened it in 1978. Reporters gathered, cameras clicked, and I spoke. About legacy, about silence, about how betrayal doesn't always come like thunder, but in the quiet edits of a document, in the closed-door meetings no one questions, in the slow erasure of someone who trusted you to protect their truth. I didn't name my parents. I didn't have to. Everyone knew. And when I finished, I walked back into that bookstore, unlocked the attic door, and found the old tape recorder Grandpa kept hidden behind his war medals. Inside it, a single message. Good girl, he said softly, voice cracking. You did it, I cried like a child. Not because I lost something, but because I finally got it back. 3 weeks after the ruling, I changed the locks on the bookstore. Not because I feared anyone would come back, but because the old keys had too many ghosts. The locksmith was quick, efficient. He didn't ask questions when I gave him the nameplate I wanted on the inner door. Henry and Nicole Walters, proprietors. When he left, I stood alone in the quiet stillness of that front room, sunlight pooling across the hardwood floor, dust dancing in slanted beams. It was mine now, but more than that, it was whole again. Every ledger Grandpa ever wrote sat stacked on the counter. His handwriting, looped and careful, still etched across the spines. I'd spent the past week digitizing them, cataloging stories he never told anyone but me. The city paper had run a piece on the case. Granddaughter wins back legacy from Will fraud. It got clicks, it got comments, but that wasn't the story that mattered to me. This one was, the real one. The one I was writing with every shelf I dusted, every community board I rehung, every name I called to say, come back. This place is open again, and it remembers you. Amanda returned the following Saturday, her baby strapped to her chest, arms full of donated books. She didn't say much, just smiled and placed them on the table by the poetry wall. Claire handled the admin rebuild, joking that truth has a paperwork trail longer than sin. Marcus visited once, off the clock, and bought a copy of Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, even though I'd seen it on his office shelf before. And Megan, she came back, not with an apology, not with flowers, but with a single donation envelope, sealed and silent, with a note inside that read, "He knew you'd win. I just didn't think I could survive the middle." I didn't reply, but I added her name to the plaque I was installing out front, Friends of the Walters Collection. As for my parents, I heard they moved, not far, but far enough to escape the headlines. Caleb avoided charges thanks to a statement, Mom and Dad, under investigation, no jail yet, maybe never. But that didn't matter to me anymore, because I wasn't chasing punishment, I was curating memory. And memory, unlike justice, doesn't expire in court. One night I stayed late. Too late. The streetlights hummed. The windows were fogged with October chill. I opened the attic again, sat on the floor beside the old trunk. Inside, I found Grandpa's ledger from the year I turned 16, the one he'd kept hidden under the false bottom. I flipped through page after page until I found the entry. June 19, Nicole called out Thomas for lying about her college funds, said it with her chin up. Kids got fire. I see me and her, but better. I closed the book and held it against my chest. This wasn't revenge. It never had been. It was reclamation of my name, of my worth, of a story they tried to end halfway through. Now, it had a new ending, the one I wrote myself. At dawn, I opened the door, let the wind in, and turned the sign to open.